Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Church in Fall River. Thank you all for joining us today, and now we shall begin.
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Fall River. This morning, I want to talk about something that is near and dear to each person's heart: personal religion. What it is, how I've come to think about it, how we're exploring it at the Universalist Unitarian Church of Brockton, and why I think understanding it and sharing it is absolutely critical to the survival of Unitarian Universalism. So that's what's in store. Any announcements?
Morning, everyone. So I wanted to say welcome, Ron, Rob. So nice to see you. You're Gregorian. I was away, so I missed you.
Right.
I feel bad to see you in here, so I'm so glad you could be here today.
Thank you.
And let me tell you, I'm not mistaken, Rob is the minister at the church in Brockton, where my brother-in-law, who has passed away up there,
Oh, yeah.
used to be the minister, so we had that little connection. I used to go there too every once in a while. So, and I wanted to let people know that Lisa Burke will be here next week. She's one of our babies, so let's have a good show for her. Thank you.
Anything? To begin our service, Richard will light our chalice. The flame that we light at the beginning of our worship services is a symbol of the way in which we are bound together by something inside of us that is bright, that burns, that connects us as a family, not simply a collection of people who may or may not think alike, but a family that is bound together in a variety of emotional ways in which we have a great deal of compassion and compassion and caring for one another and for anyone who cares to join this family. It is a family open to everyone. Our first hymn is number 188, an invitation to anyone and everyone, just like the parable of the unannounced feast in the New Testament. Come, come, wherever you are, whoever you are. Come, wherever you are, wander, worship, lover of thee. Ours is no caravan of despair. Now, some can pick it up at an alternative place. Let's go through again. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Let us share our covenant with one another. Love is the doctrine of this church. Quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. Let us join together in prayer. These times that we are living in seem particularly stressful and anxious when representatives of two worldwide international faiths are at war in a land that they both regard as a holy land. And when we face a process in our own country, an election that will not only set the character of where this country is heading for the next 4 years, but beyond that, because the result of that election will have a great impact in determining what our approach to addressing the question of climate change and our relationship to the natural environment in perhaps two quite different ways. One of which responsibility, one that borders on absolute irresponsibility. So when we come to these periods in our history, it's important that we find a way to let ourselves settle, become open, become relaxed. And in fact, a service that I produced for a virtual radio broadcast this Sunday invites the hearers to undergo what I call a full body meditation. It's not just a way to relax, it's really a way to open up one's heart, one's soul, to a new understanding that they have of the complexities that surround us, the level of ambiguities about what the social and ethical issues are that face the United States now, that are more complex and therefore more ambiguous than they were during the 50s and 60s, during the civil rights movement. And I can tell anyone how to access that meditation, or perhaps one day take you all through a full body meditation. But one way to open up is to share things that we are experiencing in our own lives. So at this time, I invite anyone who has a joy or concern or sorrow that they would like to share to now do so.
So I just wanted to say what a beautiful service we had yesterday for David. I was touched that there were so many people there that who shared beautiful memories of him, which just brought their spirit to the room. And I was really happy that we eventually got around to doing that, we're able to do that. So thank you so much for everyone who was here. That was a joy for me. But I have a very serious sadness today as well. One of my dearest friends, Helen, who some of you have met at the Belmont when we go to hear back porch play. Her daughter, Bridget, was rushed to the hospital last night and is in very serious condition. They don't know what's wrong, but they are considering the fact that she could die. And really, she's a youngish woman, and it breaks my heart because Helen's already lost one daughter. And this is her daughter who has cerebral palsy, who's in the hospital. So if you do pray, please pray for strength for Helen to get through what is going to happen, what might happen, or to bring her joy or extreme sadness. And healing us.
As someone who's here just about every Sunday, I wanted to express my thanks to all the people who made this place look so much better than it has recently. The people who cleaned out the kitchen. We have new chairs, we have new tablecloths, the light over Nancy, though, turned out the light over Nancy. We have two signs out in front of the grass and cut a lot of the bushes. It looks terrific. And I just want to thank all of you who did this.
My joy, of course, was yesterday with Dr. Reedy. A beautiful day. Thank goodness everyone did show up. It was a blessing. It's going to be in the house forever.
Thank you. And I am to remind everyone that at the close of the service, please do take one of the flowers from the flowers that are right in front of us, so that they do not wilt, but bring it to your home and share it with someone there as a piece of sunshine. And the sun is shining, more or less. In our services, we have an opportunity to engage in a period of quietness, of silence, and to let that period be filled by what enters our awareness as it comes, as it approaches us, with whatever meaning that it has. So I invite us now to enter that period of quiet silence and meditation And we'll conclude with singing Spirit of Life. Well, that was so well sung. I invite us to sing yet another hymn. Hymn number 346, Come Sing a Song with Me. 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 That I might know you. And I'll bring you home. And hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream of me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. I might know you. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. I might know you. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come At this time, we welcome your gifts for the good works of this congregation. Unitarian Universalists think of themselves as engaged in their own individual spiritual journeys. But what do we know of the content of these journeys that are things that are known to the person whose journey it is, and that for the most part remain private? In fact, in the years that I've served Unitarian Universalist congregations as a pastor, I've never really seen Unitarian Universalists share much of their deepest beliefs and feelings with one another. Well, UUs have these 7 rather abstract principles that they repeat, but there's not much sharing in that. I mean, nothing that really grabs your soul, that makes you feel at the time that what that's about is a matter of life and death. It's an intellectual assent. So I want to talk about something I call personal religion. And the way I think of it is that it is something that comes from the deepest, most core feelings and values that a person develops or wrestles with throughout their life. And the idea was that throughout their life, people develop some core values, or perhaps core questions, or perhaps just core dilemmas that are based on their personal experience, and that are often quite different from the beliefs or the creeds or the principles of any particular institutional faith that they may have been associated with. And so, rather than simply one's assent to a formal creed or theology, something that's been written down by someone else, from some theologian or some religious body or from some other person's revelatory experience, these are dilemmas or values that are typically expressed in a narrative about that person's own individual life. Something about the experiences and reflection on those experiences which have their own structures of meaning and values that are formed for that person. So these narratives are typically stories. They're orally transmitted accounts that are told from one individual to another, that are repeated within families, that are shared from one generation to the next, shared within a person's immediate community. Some of them may be the things that are told or repeated at memorial services when someone has passed away. So how did this idea come to me? When I was a professor teaching at UMass Boston, I developed a project that I called the Oral Traditions Project. And its purpose was to have students capture the narratives of personal religion based on people's personal experience, to elicit accounts that other people would give. They would be using techniques that are drawn from anthropology and especially field ethnography. And the methods are ones that basically sound out a person's own perceptions of their deepest and most important values directly from the individuals themselves. They include whatever is important to that individual, their social values, political views, religious views. The idea was to get access to insights about personal belief that could not be obtained through indirect means like formal surveys. And so the methodology was anecdotal. People were asked to tell it like it is, in their own terms, using their own words and concepts. So it was a way to reach out to the actual context of how religious meaning was formed in people's lives. And so the anecdotes were not based on an interview. Instead, they were elicited simply as a free response to an open-ended question like, well, tell me about some experience that reflects what you hold sacred, something that you might pass on to your family or your children or your closest friends. And the subjects were free to respond in any way that they chose, or they were free to stop and simply leave the encounter with one of the students at any time for ethical reasons. They were simply encouraged to speak about their most powerful or problematic personal and family experiences to get an idea of how those values actually arose in the context of lived experience rather than as secondary intellectualizations about them. The subjects were anonymous. Their identities were removed in a three-layer process, and so it eliminated or altered any identifying information for both the storyteller and the prompter. So I thought about that in the course of the life of the congregation that I serve in Brockton. And it occurred to me that as members of Unitarian Universalist congregation, we live in a community of fellow explorers who are traveling their own paths to discover religious and spiritual meanings. That each person journeys on their own route, and each of us may then have been led to quite different feelings of the spiritual nature, their different understandings of what counts as meaningful and valuable in our lives. But we are also members of a shared family of diverse individuals who honor, presumably, our very diversity, who desire to share what things we hold in common with one another. And in fact, I became increasingly convinced that to understand our own feelings, we must find a way to be able to share them with others. And so that's what our exploration at the Universalist Unitarian Church of Brockton is all about, in personal religion. As I said, it's not doing theology. It's not a question of your assent to some formal creed or a theology that has been given to you in one way or another. But sharing personal experiences is something that's very difficult, awkward. No one wants to feel compelled to lay out their entire life history, certainly not to try to give a summary of it, like you're giving a report to a teacher. So the way we've approached it at the church in Brockton is to form a circle where everyone is equal, and to begin by going around inviting each person to recount just one important event in their life in which something that they came to realize as valuable was still a part of the cluster of values or attachments that they hold on to. And other people who would be listening would be able to ask questions expressing their interest in the story, or perhaps to ask for a bit more detail, but not to judge the content of what another person shares, or to raise questions, in a sense, to challenge the right of the other person to say what they say. Because for any personal account to be meaningful, it had to be also completely honest. And so that was a level of respect and acceptance that had to be agreed to by everyone in advance. So personal religion then is what people wrestle with in their actual lives. Not theology, not philosophy of religion, or claims about what religious belief is or should be or should not be. It's not something that you would learn in a class, but what each of us, each one of us here, has experienced in the course of their own life in the past. So, to give you a feel for the kinds of things that people have talked about, I thought I would share with you some excerpts from some of the accounts that were gathered in the Oral Traditions Project at UMass Boston. They're made anonymous, and so you don't have to worry about placing it with some person. You can't find your way to that. But you can get a feel for what kind of experience they drew on. And there are excerpts from 4 examples that I'll share with you. The first expresses a common theme of feeling at some point in your life disembodied. This experience of seeing a light at the end of a tunnel when a person has a near-death experience. But what was striking about this one was the importance that the person assigned to reuniting with relatives rather than any desire to be or to exist in some post-mortem state, to live a life beyond this. And it's as if the importance of reuniting with relatives and personal acquaintances replaced any overarching need to hold even some central concept like an idea of God. Now, this individual was a white woman, female, mid-40s, and she was recalling an event that occurred in her early 20s. She said, "I had a near-death experience. I was in a serious accident and pronounced dead on the scene. When I woke up, I was outside my body, looking down at it from above. I saw medical people working on me and saw what bad shape my body was in. When I was out of my body, I didn't have any attachment to the body. I felt free from all physical body limitations. I was floating in thin air. I had poor eyesight during my life, but up there I could see 100 feet. I started to float upwards towards the sky. A dark circle appeared, and I knew that I had to go in there. I traveled into a tunnel that was all dark, and then I saw a tiny light at the end, and I started moving extremely fast, faster than anything on earth we could experience. I got closer and closer to this light. As I got closer, I felt a warm, peaceful calm, a loving feeling as I was bathed in the light. I cannot describe this in our language, but it was wonderful. All the while I was questioning what was happening. Was I dead? I felt alive. This experience seemed so real. I continued on and went into the light. On the other side of the light, the vast beauty and brilliance was incredible. There were pristine mountain ranges. The air was warm, but not too hot or too cold, just right. The colors of the meadows from all different types of flowers were laid out in front of me. They were colors so magnificent they can't be known or described in our earthly life. It was awesome and amazing. I started walking across the field and saw beings up at the bridge. I instantly recognized them and knew it was my grandmother and my aunt. They were so happy to see me and looked young and vibrant. My grandmother looked young and beautiful, and my aunt looked the same, but more vibrant. They spoke, but it wasn't like we talked through our mouths, but through telepathy, mind to mind. They knew what was being said and what to say instantaneously. I felt that my knowledge was expanding. I said to them, "What is this place?" And they said, "Home." They asked me if I wanted to stay here and go back to Earth and get my life back. At first I said I wanted to stay and be here with you guys, but they kept asking me if I wanted to go back. I then decided that I still had more to do on Earth and that I knew I would be back soon. When I made that decision, I was then pulled downward and slammed back into my body. I heard the doctor say, "We got her back." I was very upset because of the amount of pain I was in, but happy I had a second chance. The recovery was hard because I shattered my hip and legs. I had to relearn how to walk. I recovered and now I can walk fine today. The doctors were amazed at my full recovery because of the amount of damage to my lower body. I look at life completely different now. No material things matter anymore, but what I focus on is love in my life with my friends and my family. Now, one thing that might capture the attention of people in that narrative is this image of the bridge, and anyone who's had pets, particularly dogs, but any pet, may often be reminded of this. Well, it's not really a poem, but it's a little story that describes when you have lost a pet, that particularly one that has been part of your life for many years. And the dog goes to this place that they call the Rainbow Bridge and lives romping around with other animals that are awaiting their companion, their earthly companion, to meet them at the bridge. And there's this description of the dog seeing the person at the bridge and then racing towards them as fast as their little legs will carry them. I think of my dog Buddy that way a lot. The second account is rather different. Because in this case, the person was actually drawn back to the dominant institutional religion of his culture, but now in a very idiosyncratic way. And this was done solely for reasons of solidifying his family connections, not on the basis of any particular religious claims or practices of his tradition. This was a male in his late 20s with Asian parents, but he had been born in the United States. He said, I joined the Marines and was shipped to Iraq, where I had a spiritual experience that changed my life. My unit was running a convoy through Fallujah when a bomb went off to my right. I was thrown out of the Humvee and landed on my neck, twisting it. I was knocked unconscious. I didn't know what happened at the time, but now know that a car bomb had gone off only 10 feet from me. When I woke up, my friends had put me on a sheet and were running back to the base camp. I saw their lips moving, but I couldn't hear them. I just knew they weren't going to leave me. I didn't feel any pain, but when I came to, I felt a great sense of peace come over me. I just knew I would be fine at that point. It is hard to describe exactly what happened, but I knew that something was looking out for me. I got treatment. They learned my neck and back weren't broken as they probably should have been, but my collarbone was. I suffered a lot of nerve damage in my left arm. When I got home, I asked my girlfriend to marry me. I no longer take anything for granted. I enjoy life much more. I am looking into my culture more and more. My own understanding of Buddhism may become a part of it. When I left my home, my parents started practicing again, and I want to join them somehow. I'm not currently practicing any formal religion. I will probably be forced to retire from the Marines because of the injuries I sustained, but I will still work for them repairing weapons. I don't think a Buddhist would do something like that, but my kind would. Another account may be familiar to Unitarian Universalists, or at least for people of the subject's general age range, where the predominant sources for generating structures of meaning and value that this person regarded as permanent or potentially permanent were drawn from objects in nature, but objects experienced in highly visceral ways. A tree suddenly seen for the first time and a feeling of joy, its connectedness to the universe as a whole, and this person's place in that universe. Now, this account is without reference to any institutional faith tradition. The individual was a white male in his late 20s. He said, I remember one day, maybe about 10 years ago, walking down a street close to where I live. I don't know if I was walking home from somewhere or just taking a stroll. I was walking up a slight hill. It was a very nice day, sunny, probably about 65 degrees. As I approached the top of the hill, I was walking by a very large, beautiful tree. I had walked this way several times, and I had always admired the tree. I walked past the tree and was continuing to just walk down the street when all of a sudden I felt this sudden wave of joy, contentment, connectedness to the rest of the universe. I really don't know how to explain it. It lasted perhaps a minute, but I will remember it for the rest of my life. It lasted perhaps just a second or two, But that one moment in my life is one of the reasons that I believe in a powerful force that permeates the universe that we all have a connection with. There's a quote from Albert Einstein where he says, the fellow gives the quote, "One feels as if one is dissolved and merged into nature." Insofar as Unitarians express that view, certainly if you read Thoreau, but particularly Emerson, read Emerson in his Divinity School address, and you'll find something very close to that. And the question for me, does that therefore imply that the universe is a possible place for meaningful moral awareness and moral life? If it isn't, it changes radically your view of what meaning is, as it did for Albert Camus, for example. The last account that I want to share with you is remarkable for its being highly idiosyncratic, very individualized in terms of what were the objects and the events that prompted and formed the basis of a kind of significant reorientation in this person's life. There's no reason to think that the subject was not satisfied with the concept of God as simply one particular physical object among others. Recently, I've been working on something that compares what I call conceptual models of different fundamental religious views with one another, and in particular, polytheistic views in which, in my understanding, nature is perceived in very fragmented ways that leads to assigning values to different aspects of it that are a multiple, or what I call a multiplicity of sources of meaning, as opposed to the exclusive monotheism in the Western traditions of Judaism and Christianity and Islam. Understanding that the religion of the ancient Israelites, by the way, emerged from a polytheistic tradition in Canaan. And those two models being compared with something that I call universality, which almost goes back to the natural world and yet sees it in a different way than would somebody who participates in a polytheistic religion. But here's this individual. She was a white woman in her mid-40s. On my way to California, I stopped in Texas, where there was a parade in which people were dressed up like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. I thought that any place that could embrace and celebrate the Eeyore aspects of oneself is the kind of place I'd like to live. Perhaps a strange view of Texas, but nevertheless. So I was married there and had 2 children. Later, I became a park ranger in northern Arizona. The empty desert there is my church, a place where I feel at oneness most powerfully. There are time-sculpted rocks there, a particular spot where there are 3 rocks that resemble turtles. One reminds me of my belief that in the Earth Mother and 2 smaller ones, they look like my children. There is a natural flat stone that I use as a bench to sit on while I meditate. I believe in a very spiritual universe. One dream sums up what I believe. In this dream, I was waitressing outside on a porch, and I was looking up at the moon. It turned into a ball of electric energy, and I was reaching to touch it when I got shot out of Earth into space and watched as an asteroid shot down into the ocean. A voice in space was telling me that the reason for the asteroid was because we were destroying the planet. Tidal waves covered the planet, and I could see the dolphins swimming and jumping in the water. And I heard them squeaking, "It's our turn now," over and over again. It's our turn now. Now, the kinds of stories that people have begun to recount at our church in Brockton are quite different from these. But as they are being told, I am beginning to see some themes, and maybe they are themes that can be shared and that bind them together as a congregation. But I firmly believe that unless we can do that direct communication with one another, face to face, not via posts on the internet, not through virtual reality, but through the reality of sensing and feeling and perhaps touching other individuals, a congregation can develop an awareness, a consciousness of itself, and from that to expand to a world that might welcome it. Because I fear that unless we can do that, Unitarian Universalists will become another one of those, what I think George Orwell called those smelly little ideologies competing for men's souls. So if you're interested in how we've set this up at Brockton, I'd be happy to share that with you. I think this congregation could do that sharing very easily. Our final hymn is number 295, Sing Out Praises for the Journey. In closing, let us think of ways in which we can share the things that are perhaps most difficult even for ourselves to think of, to sort out. But perhaps in our shared confusions, we can come to know and therefore care about one another more deeply. and in that ambiguity find messages of hope, ways to share them with others that perhaps expresses the deepest meaning of what it is to be human. And when you do go out from this sanctuary this morning, do remember, let's be careful out there.